and that he just needed one person to ask him. And it's crazy to think about because not a single person in the time from his house to the Golden Gate Bridge, anyone said anything, looked at him, asked him anything. And it just, he gives such a great perspective of someone who wanted to die and went through with it, but survived.
Lights, camera, action. We're back for your satisfaction from Action Business Furniture Studios is where it's happening. We have a special guest star appearance today from Kirsten Hughes. Be sure to give a big round of applause to our guest. Now, last filling in, but not least, is Zane. Take it away, Zane.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, welcome everyone. We're excited to have this conversation this week. And yeah, we'll just get started like we normally do, kind of go around, introduce everybody, and then we'll get right into it. This can be a bit of a sensitive topic, especially talking about youth and mental health, and especially when we get into suicide. So just everyone be mindful of that, and just share from the heart and how we can help. I think youth, but I think all of this applies to kind of everyone. But we're going to go ahead and start right here if you want to introduce, and we'll go ahead.
Yeah. My name's Steve Hicks, and after surviving Jeffrey Dahmer, I got into fitness, and now I am a fitness and wellness coach.
I have to follow up with that. I'm Kelsey with Naomi Con Agency. I just love helping people with insurance and getting all the questions and education out there.
My name is Gary Canavello. I'm a singer and an actor, and I love to bring joy to people's hearts. And I try and get, if I meet a stranger, I try and get them to smile back at me.
Love that. I'm Cherie Sauer. I co-own Success Without Sacrifice. After experiencing burnout in my career as a stay-at-home mom and as a business owner, I decided there had to be a better way, and now my passion is really helping business owners to grow and scale without burnout.
Hi, my name is Dave Ribble from Stand Up Mastery. I do personal development in communication, connection, and collaboration, and I'd love to work with you and talk to you about all of the limiting beliefs you might be dealing with that we could help you with.
I too survived Dahmer. I'm James Kettner. I own J2K Sales Pros, which basically allows you to rent me out as a salesperson, as well as business development and consulting and sales coaching. And I also own JMK Connections, which is a TV and film music licensing company.
I'm Heidi Simmons, and I'm the founder of Empower and Engage. And in the digital world we're living in right now, where you can connect with pretty much any way, a whole bunch of different ways, it is causing disconnection. And so I am hosting a workshop on June 28th for moms. And the kids get to play outside, get some fresh air, and the moms get to learn how to navigate this digital world of parenting and connecting closer with their kids.
All right, I'm Rob Ruder, and I'm founder of IDIC Designs, and I work with business owners to align their technology to their best business growth and opportunities. So that's what keeps me busy.
And I'm Kirsten Hughes. I'm with New ESD 101, which is the Northeast Educational Service District. I'm here to talk about Hope Squad, which is our peer-to-peer suicide prevention program that we have through the ESD. So yeah, I don't know where we want to start, Zane.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm Zane Schwindeman with Zebra Go. We help small businesses with, well, especially people in the trades, being able to go out and do their job, and we help answer the calls, get customers scheduled, so you don't have to worry about missing all the calls that you paid to get. So we can help you out that way. But yeah, so I learned about Hope Squad because my wife was actually doing her internship for her college program at the middle school at East Valley, and then got involved with Hope Squad. So yeah. I guess just start I don't know if there's a background for Hope Squad and kind of where that came from.
Yeah, I'll give a little background. So we were first introduced to this program here in Spokane by a group called Kellen Cares, started by a local mom who lost her son to suicide a few years ago. And she was really just scouring the internet and looking for places and organizations and resources that would support students in school in a way that she could find maybe some meaning, or, find something that she could bring to the school where her child went. And she was able to connect with some of really awesome suicide prevention nonprofits that we have in Spokane, including FailSafe for Life. And connected also with Inland Northwest Behavioral Health. And so they came to us in like 2023 and said, hey, we really like this program. It's called Hope Squad. What can we do to bring it off the ground? And so we were able to bring the CEO at the time, Dr. Greg Hudnall, and he comes out of Utah. He was a school principal and counselor, and he experienced a student suicide. And he was like, this was unprecedented in the 90s for him as a counselor and just a school administrator. Never experienced that, and he really reached out to his community in Utah and asked, like, what can we do to help support our youth? And that's really where Hope Squad was born. And now in 2025, 20 years later, Hope Squad is on the SAMHSA's list of nationally recognized suicide prevention programs. It's evidence-based. They've done a ton of research on it. It's in Canada and the US now, in over 39 states, and we are so grateful that we got to bring it to Spokane. So we currently have 14 schools participating across 3 school districts. So East Valley School District, the Meade School District, and Spokane Public Schools. So we've been able to bring this program to middle schoolers and high schoolers, but I think it's really important for us to think about I was telling the group last week when I was introducing myself that in the state of Washington right now, for children and young adults aged 10 to 24, suicide is the second leading cause of death. So the first leading cause of death is accidents, second is suicide, and third is homicide, and usually death by firearms. So in the United States, it is the third leading cause of death, but in Washington, it's the second. So I think that's really important for us to think about when we talk about really important programs like this, like Hope Squad, is that our youth are really struggling. And it's not just something that maybe some families are experiencing, it's all families are experiencing this, and it's really becoming a public health crisis for our youth. Especially, thinking about the digital world, that our youth are really connecting with each other on social media and digitally, and not so much in person anymore. And so Hope Squad really builds on this idea of connection, and that we know that when youth are struggling, they're going to go to their peers far more often than they're ever going to go to an adult. Even when they know that that adult is someone that they trust, that has resources and everything, right? But for them, they can't fathom this idea that an adult could experience the same things that they are experiencing right now. And so they want to go to their peers. So Dr. Hugnall was like, how do I help equip youth with some skills so that way when one of their friends does come to them and say, I'm dealing with these things, I'm feeling dispirited, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling anxious, all of these things are happening in my life and I don't know how to deal with them, and sometimes I just feel like I wish that it would end, right? And so his program and his curriculum really brought to life this idea of how do we teach youth to connect with each other, and how do we give them skills to recognize when it's far above what they can deal with, right? And how do we then reach out safely and provide that warm handoff to a trusted adult, to an adult who has the skills and is able to help them get the right support. Yeah, so I think we look at this great survey in Washington that's been around since the 70s, and it's called the Healthy Youth Survey. Some of you might have taken it when you were in school. You probably don't remember it, but it was probably really, really, really long. But it asks some of those questions, and we know from the Healthy Youth Survey in Washington right now that our youth, that 1 in 3 students are experiencing persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness, right? And that 15% of those youth then are also considering suicide. So when we think about all the youth in a classroom, right? We have 20, it used to be 20 kids in a classroom, but it's a lot higher. But if we think 30 kids in a classroom, at least 10 of those youth right then and there are really struggling with anxiety or depression or something that's making them feel like they can't go on, And that's a really big deal for our teachers too, right? And our school system, and how do we help equip them with the right kind of skills so that way when they're in their classroom, how can they start recognizing those signs of some of those things that our youth are experiencing?
When can we go to Q&A?
Right now.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, we've established that like Heidi has said many times, kids don't necessarily want to just talk to their parents.
They don't. Yeah.
So you're coming in with a program. Who's going to be the adult in the room, so to speak?
Yeah, so we train our advisors through a really, they go through a pretty lengthy training process that teaches them, we really use the tenets of QPR training, which is question, persuade, refer, and we help our adults learn some of those skills for how do we have those conversations and asking those brave questions of like, do you want to die, or do you want to go to sleep and not wake up?
Are you
right?
trying to get them to talk to you?
Yeah, to talk to you. And so we give our teachers, our advisors, a strong set of skills that allows them to then assess the situation and then bring them to the next person, right? So not all of our schools or our teachers are equipped with this ability to like, we don't want our teachers to diagnose. We don't want them to make those decisions, but we want them to be able to determine, is this a crisis? Or is this something that's an ongoing thing that I need to refer them to, a different resource? So our youth, though, underneath that are also trained in what we call the HOPE approach, which is a more developmentally appropriate version of QPR. So it's hold on, persuade, empower. And so the idea is for them to be able to have the conversation with their friend and say, hey, I hear that you're struggling. Want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to persuade to hold on. I want you to hold on until I can get you to the right person. And then I want to empower you to have the skills the self-help skills, right? So our youth are not empowered. Most of them aren't empowered with this ability to ask for help. And so by the fact that we're kind of reducing the amount of space between them and that higher, that administrator maybe, or the mental health clinician or the counselor at school that's going to really determine how do we get parents involved if this is an acute crisis, if this student is acutely saying, I want to kill myself right now. How do we get the right law enforcement and first responders involved? But we're not asking our youth to make those decisions. We're just asking them to say, hey, can I have this conversation with you? I notice that you're struggling. Can I take you to an adult that can help you find the right path? And then that adult then makes the decision, is this a crisis or a non-crisis? And then brings them to the right person, because we can't equip all of our teachers with mental health counseling skills. That's a really hard task, and we also don't want to do that, right, too, because that's not their job. Their job is not to be a mental health clinician, and we want to bring them to the right person. So it's kind of a little chain. They're like our little observers. They're our little eyes and ears that say, hey, maybe I'm hearing this from someone at school. Let me take this to this adult advisor who's gone through some training to learn about warning signs, and then let that advisor, as the adult, help staff that situation. Let me talk to that youth. Let me see what's happening, and then let me take you to the right.
Does that mean that most of that kind of work happens after normal?
Sometimes it does. See, and that's the thing. That's one of the big things what we've been learning is how do we help our youth equip them with the right tools so that way when they're seeing those things online or hearing those things after school, because yeah, that's really where it's happening, is our youth are even up late at night talking to each other about some of those things. And so we encourage our schools to participate in a referral process. And so they really, as a group, as a school, outline what that process looks like. So every school is completely different, but we have technology is great in some ways, that we have ways for students to connect with each other on like Google Classroom or other, anonymous apps. One of our schools in Meade has an online resource, anonymous tip line, and one of our students actually used it in the last year and probably saved a life. He said, I heard something from this other student, called into the anonymous tip line, and the adult who was in charge of that then was able to immediately connect with that child and that family and immediately get that child into some supports. And so it's quite possible that that MEAD student really did save a life by knowing their referral process, by knowing I'm hearing this outside of school. This is my job as a Hope Squad student then is to make this referral to this line. And so they followed their training, which is awesome. Yeah.
Do they have require any psychological or psychiatric training, Dominica?
No, we don't ask our youth to learn any of that. We walk them through some of those normal like warning signs. So for me, I think about, I had a friend that I went to high school with who died by suicide a few years after when I was in college. And he showed the classic signs of someone who was looking to end his life. And the thing was he gave little bits and pieces to everyone. So some people, he was saying things about, how he, wasn't feeling like he wanted to go on. Some people, he was showing some signs of depression. He was giving away some of his prized items, like things like that. And then like kind of putting steps in place of like, if something happens to me, this is what I want to happen to like my pets and things like that. But the thing is we all didn't really see those. And it's because not everyone, we didn't get all the information. We all would have had to kind of like get together and learn and share with each other all these little bits and pieces of that puzzle to really understand like what was happening. And also, I mean, I was only 19 or 20 and I had no one had really told me this is what happens when someone wants to end their life. And so we just equip youth with the tools to recognize those things. So when they hear someone say, oh, I'm having such a hard time, I just want to go to sleep and never wake up, right? Like that should be a clue for a Hope Squad student to say, oh, that means that something's happening. I need to go tell an adult, right? And sometimes it's not a crisis, right? Unfortunately, we live in a digital age where a lot of youth use, phrases like, I hope you kill yourself, or I'm gonna kill myself, like when we're having a bad day, right? Or they send each other memes or things that like indicate stuff like that, right? And so it's helping youth be able to recognize those differences of someone who's saying, I'm having a really bad day, I'm just gonna kill myself, versus like, I'm actually having a really hard time, this thing is happening in my life. I've lost this friend and I'm feeling really down, and how do we connect them to the right
So
people?
this really only works if the students that are working in this capacity are still anonymous?
So we like to, like for East Valley Middle School, I'll pick on them for example because I love them. But having students know who your Hope Squad students are is super important actually, because then they feel like that student is someone they can go to. So I think I'll back up and I'll mention something too about Hope Squad. When students are asked to be on Hope Squad, it's not an invitation. They have to be nominated by their peers to be on Hope Squad. So we hold a school-wide nomination process where students have to nominate each other, and it's questions like, if you were dealing with something, who's someone you would go to? Who's a good friend? Who's someone who's trusted? Someone who's going to keep a secret? That kind of stuff, right? Who's going to, keep that information anonymous? And then those students get invited to join Hope Squad. Not every student's going to feel like they have the capacity to be a part of it, right? And so we invite them to join Hope Squad. And then that's when they go through all of that training and whatnot. And they do sign a contract that indicates that they're not allowed to share personal information. And then that means they could be let go of Hope Squad, right? But knowing who they are is sometimes really so helpful for our students. So our East Valley Middle School students wear their Hope Squad shirts every week as an indication of, oh, I'm on Hope Squad. And for some students, when we first introduce this into schools, they're like, oh, great, Hope Squad, right? Just another club. But once we start building that rapport, that students start saying like, oh, this student's a Hope Squad student. Maybe there's someone that feels safe to talk to, right? And then that's how we really build school culture. That's how we really combat some of that stigma that keeps youth from wanting to talk about mental health. As much as we don't want to talk about it, mental health is part of our lives for every single one of us, whether we're a youth or an adult in the community, right? I also think it's important to recognize too, suicide touches almost every family, whether you're like really closely or far from you, right? yeah, I feel like I got lost my train of thought. Train station gone.
I'll bring up something. So I'm, I have a history that I was 9 years old, and one of my classmates committed. It's commonly now believed that he committed suicide, but at the time, what we knew is that he had been found hanging from the banister with a cord around his head, and his younger sister went mute for a long time. She could never talk about what happened, but there was always this question, well, maybe somebody broke into the house, because the kids were by themselves. This was, actually, you mentioned your 70s study. Well, that's when this happened. But what I take away from what you've been talking about is the fact that because we're so more connected now, there were other mechanisms that, his issue may have become more known outside to his peers. Nobody realized how depressed he was, but now knowing the history, there was a pedophile in the community and actually I lost 2 friends as a result of it, and others that have struggled with depression for years. And so what I like about what you're talking about is making awareness, and I think this is good for any age group, awareness of what the signs
Absolutely.
are. What are they saying? Because again, I lost a coworker in my 30s, and that one totally floored us, because he was very devoted to his family. He left town with his family, and then he suddenly showed up and he was divorced and things, and he was coming around looking for work, looking for that, and then next thing we know, he was gone. And so it's that awareness and having somebody say something is our message.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, agreed. I think, and that's the thing too, is we know that if we equip youth with these skills when they're younger, they're more likely to take those skills into adulthood, right? And they're more likely to practice them and use them. And so the hope, no pun intended, is that our students in the future will be, members of the Spokane community here, and will be in tune to recognizing those things. And Rome's not built in a day, right? It's going to take a long time for just society in general, for us to really embrace mental health and mental wellness, and really starting to destigmatize when we're younger is one of the best ways that we help destigmatize when we're older. Because the hope would be that in the future that that coworker would have been able to reach out to someone, or that someone else would have noticed that something was off, right?
Is there a ratio of equal proportions of these kind of cases and increased peer pressure? Is it something that the educational system is able to address to parents to cut down on the peer pressure that's causing the other things to be anxiety?
I mean, I will say that I think social media plays a really big role in that. So, I'm 29, I'm nearly 30, I'm on all social media. I probably spend way too much time on TikTok. But I think about the youth that are spending time on there, and we live in an age of self-diagnosis. Like, I'll put that out there. That's really what we live in. We live in an age of where youth especially are self-diagnosing themselves, of saying, oh, I have depression, oh, I have anxiety, but aren't actually going through the process of talking to an adult, a doctor, and finding out, right? And so there is this peer pressure of youth amongst youth to a status symbol, right? To indicate that they have depression, or that they've experienced trauma or something, right? And I think it's a push, it's a peer pressure push on the internet more so than it is in person between youth. And I do think that by destigmatizing mental health, by encouraging youth to be a part of programs like this, really does help us combat some of that issue, right? Just because, you know, I don't know if anyone remembers when 13 Reasons Why came out, the TV show on Netflix. So I read this book as, you know, probably a middle schooler. It's a great book, but they made this TV show called 13 Reasons Why, and it is about a youth who, a high school youth who completes suicide, and she leaves 13 tapes, and it's 13 tapes of her 13, her 13 reasons.
Really good.
It was really good, but unfortunately, in some areas of the world, it glamorized suicide in some ways. And we know from research that talking about suicide is not going to increase a suicidal person, right? So the more we have to ask those questions. We have to be able to be brave enough and say, are you thinking of killing yourself? And asking those questions, right? Because that's super important. But we also do see this glamorization, unfortunately, and this happens where a youth does complete suicide or dies by suicide, and then we have a rash of a few more after, right? And it is something that is really hard to combat when you're someone who's trying to spread destigmatization of mental wellness and talking about suicide, right? Because that can be really hard to see a youth and then more youth experience, and see families experience the same grief, and then try to share scientifically, research-wise, that we know the more we talk about it, the more people are open. It makes me start thinking about Kevin Hines. He's this wonderful speaker. He is a survivor, one of the 12 survivors of a suicide on the Golden Gate Bridge. And we brought him to Spokane a couple years ago through this Prevent Suicide Spokane coalition. Excellent speaker. But he talks about the fact that he was acutely suicidal, and he was on the tram to the bridge. And all he said he could think about was if one person asked him anything, how's your day? Where are you going? That he would tell them what he was going to do. Mm-hmm. And that he just needed one person to ask him. And it's crazy to think about, because not a single person in the time from his house to the Golden Gate Bridge, anyone said anything, looked at him, asked him anything. And he gives such a great perspective of someone who wanted to die and went through with it, but survived. And talks about how if someone had just talked to him, he would have spilled his guts. He would have told everyone what was going on. And we hear that from our youth too, our youth who are survivors, or youth who have attempted and it didn't, and didn't die by suicide. Helping them, they really are like, if someone had just asked me the question, or just asked me how I was doing, I would have told them everything. And so I think that's really important when we talk about this, that even adults, like he was 19 or 20 at the time, and he said that if just one person had asked him, and I think about all of the people like here in the room and the people that you run into every day, we have no idea what people are dealing with. And even if we are acutely in tune of just noticing what's happening with other humans around us, I think that, we can create a better community, a community that is, thoughtful about what's happening to other people, and that you could potentially save a life by just being able to ask some of those scary questions of, how are you really doing, when someone is like, oh, I'm fine, and you're like, no, but like, how are you really doing, right? And so I think the youth that participate in this program are just some of the coolest kids that I've ever gotten to work with, and they are those brave souls that are willing to ask those questions. And I think they show us a really important path of us as adults learning how to ask those questions ourselves and of other people, right? We talked last week about like having hard conversations about like death, like other, and aging and, disability, right? But I think that those conversations are hard enough, but I also think we don't have enough conversations as adults about mental wellness. And how do we help encourage our community to be a part of this work, so that way when youth do see like Hope Squad out in the wild, right, that they know that that's that person is a safe person to talk to. And this is just I've loved working on this program. I think it is just one of those really cool opportunities we have as adults to really support youth in making the world like a better place.
I was going to say that I think there's an extremely large statistic of people in this world today, in our society, that are self-destructing because of lack of, they're not committing suicide, but they're killing themselves in other ways, through drugs and through drinking.
Well, yeah, that's why we have to, like,
all these things.
yeah.
Sexual abuse is a tremendous statistic on that, but we don't know about that because they're self-medicating themselves and they're so guilty. They have so much guilt they can't share it with people. I mean, it just goes on, and it's just amazing.
I think it speaks to this facet that we see mental wellness as like this totally separate thing and not just a part of being well. So when we talk to kids about mental wellness, we want to say like mental wellness is just a part of being like just a generally healthy person. Like we talk to youth about how well are you sleeping? Youth these days don't sleep. They want to spend too much time on the internet. So it's like helping them understand how important sleep is. Even breakfast. Like I don't know how many conversations I have with middle schoolers when I'm like, a Red Bull is not breakfast. Like it isn't. I know. Imagine. But like helping youth understand that like a healthy breakfast is important. Just as a healthy body is important, a healthy brain is important. And I think too that's like how we have to frame it in some ways, even for like adults, is like that wellness is multifaceted. And I'm sure you probably have a lot to say about that. Wellness is multifaceted.
I was trying not to butt in, but yeah.
Please butt in.
No, it is. It's especially with what I do. It's like holistic fitness because there's more than just one pillar. It's more than just exercise. It's more than just diet. You do want to take care of yourself as an entire person, and so you got to take care of the mindset. You got to take care of the sleep. You got to take care of the stress management because they do support each other. Your body's not. I hate the representation of like the body as a machine. You put food in, you burn it. The body's really an ecosystem. There's a lot of interplaying parts, and when one of those parts gets sick, it just kind of makes the rest of the ecosystem a little bit more toxic.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to that point that like, I think when we talk about wellness as a whole and we talk to youth about wellness as a whole, that, you know, when you're mentally well, you know, and taking care of your body and you know, we talk to youth about stress management all the time and helping them understand coping mechanisms. Everyone's a different kind of coper. Some of us like to be active copers. Some of us want to like sit in a dark room and listen to music, right? So it just like depends on what kind of coper you are, but youth don't always learn those skills like well or from, you know, or even learn them in general. So how do we help them learn those skills so that way they can deal with life when life happens? And then, you know, equipping them with additional tools, like for their toolbox of helping them, how can I help others also see wellness into, yeah.
One thing that I kind of keep coming back to, well, we talk a lot about, okay, we need to destigmatize talking about mental health, and you know, we can say that, but what does that actually mean? How do we, especially as adults, when I know as a kid, mental health wasn't even a thing. Like, especially I've got an older father, and
my dad was like, take a spoon of peanut butter. You just need some fiber. You'll be fine.
Rub some dirt in it.
Yeah.
So how do we, with either our own kids or family or just maybe a youth that we're familiar with, how do we destigmatize that? How do we talk about that? Because I think it's, even now when we talk about it, like, there's several things I could talk about my mental health, but it's personal, it's emotional, it's hard to discuss. So how do we do that? That could be for...
Yeah.
So I lost 2 friends to suicide within 2 years that were best friends at the time. I was in my early 20s. And one of them, he was born with like 6 months left. He shouldn't have lived. And he couldn't walk very well. He drink out of a trach and all that type of stuff. And he was in his early 20s, and he cried to us, me and my other friend, that, you know, girls don't like him, he's never gonna get married. I was like, no man, you're gonna get it, just, you know, be patient. And he had called me and left me a voicemail, because I was with a girlfriend at the time. And he's like, hey, he was crying on there, and he's like, come over, blah, blah. And I called him like, hey, I'm with my girlfriend. I'll come over. I'll hang out with you. We'll go to church Friday. It was like a Tuesday night. And he's like, oh, okay. And I called him Friday. It's like 5 p.m. I was like, ready to go to church? Text, nothing. And then I got a text in the morning. It was his sister said he killed himself basically by overdosing by alcohol, putting it straight into his trach. And his dad, woke up to him dead. But, so I've been in that situation to where I probably could have looked at it very differently, but it's interesting. And then my other friend, he had a daughter. He was a gangbanger at a young age. He had tats all over his face, and he was trying to get out of that lifestyle. And the girl that was dating him took his baby out of state, and he'd cry to me, a gangbanger, like cried to me, like I miss my daughter. A year later, the new girlfriend that was with him, all he had was pictures of his daughter, and she cut him all up because she was jealous. And he was drinking and went down and shot himself in the head. And it's crazy because really, if you look at mental health, the most dangerous people we're told, and what I've seen in people is you don't think anything's happening. That's when they're at their closest, really, is because they've made a decision when their end date is. And so it's hard because sometimes you look at the situation and like, wow, like in those two instances, one, I couldn't have stopped it, I wasn't there. The other, you look at it and you see that they're depressed to a certain state, but you don't know where it is. And then others, they act perfectly fine, but they have an end date in their sight, and then they kill themselves. So what do you say to that, like, of not knowing those signs of, I think it's even more dangerous when you see someone who's like crying out for help and then all of a sudden they seem fine, right? Like when
that's honestly, that's a sign of thinking about, of sudden euphoria, of suddenly feeling like fine with your life.
Because they know what.
Because they
have an end date.
They have an end date in mind, right? I think it's really hard for us to talk about destigmatization because I think that also exists in the context in which where we're at, and I would say things that you can do in your own life: listen non-judgmentally, be able to just. Sometimes I think about this a lot when we talk to youth. A lot of them just want to talk to someone, right? So being able to listen non-judgmentally, it's really easy for us to get in our solution brains. I'm that kind of person. I always want to be like, how can I solve this problem for you? Like, let's, but sometimes what we really just need is to listen non-judgmentally to other people. I also think community connection is really important. I was saying this before our session that, pro-social opportunities are really important for youth. They're also important for adults too, right? So having some sort of connection, I think that's, connection to something in the community.
Like a room on Friday afternoon.
Like a room on Friday afternoons. This is great community connection. I also think, just knowing signs of suicide. I also think, though, again, they're different for everyone, but there are enough that we see commonly that you could brush up on. There's also FailSafe for Life that I love in Spokane, and the Prevent Suicide Spokane Coalition are great organizations that hold free community training all the time. So that's a great opportunity for you to connect with other people and to to learn more about mental health. I think talking about it is one of the best ways we destigmatize. Is that I know it's really hard to be vulnerable, but the more vulnerable we are with other people, the more vulnerable they'll be back. That's something that I've been working on as an adult. Is I feel like I too spent a lot of time by myself, isolated, thinking about all of the things that I didn't like about my life, or all of the things that I wish that I had done or hoped that I could do. And I didn't want to tell other people about that because it felt like I'm the only person that was experiencing that. And it's so easy for us to get in that frame of mind. But it really is, you are not alone. Other people are dealing with some of the same things. And when you finally open up and tell people that, you'll start recognizing and making those connections between each other and seeing that, oh, that other person is also dealing with some of those same feelings. I went and rewatched the imposter syndrome episode, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think about all the time about how much imposter syndrome I have in my own like in my own life personally and in like career-wise. But that's not something I want to openly like tell people. But then when you're in a room and you're having a conversation, you can have those conversations with people and see, oh, hey, I'm not the only one who also feels like I have no idea what I'm doing.
I think it's important to remember that because, you know, in my life, the period in which things got the worst were my junior year in college. And I honestly believe I hit it very well from the people around me, even the ones that I spent the most amount of time with. But I was very, very aware of how many nights I went to bed thinking this would just be a whole lot easier if I didn't wake up in the morning. And doing that day after day, and yet, at least in my life, there was a voice. The last thing I heard before I went to sleep was an altered voice, not the one I was thinking with, just saying, but tomorrow's got to be better. And so I came through it, but my mother was able to, through her own time with therapist, was able to recognize that I was cycling through depression. And so she came up with the means for me to go to therapy. And while it was one of amazing programs, it was 5 days. I had 2 counselors working with me, both with 6 months of follow-up, but it gave me enough of a boost that I continued my journey, on to this day. But I hear a lot of people's, respond to a suicide. The ones that strike them the most are the ones that seem to be people that were engaged and active and participating in life and going out and partying and things like that, and then they're gone. And they go, I didn't even know. And I'm saying, well, there's a certain empath that can, sense what's an emotional shadow that's there, but most of the time we have to remember it's just by, as your guest speaker, you said, who survived the San Francisco bridge, said if just one person had just said something, it would have dam would have opened and
I think it's easy to now in 2025 to feel empathetic burnout too, and that you, I think I'm a deep empath, and sometimes I feel like I feel burnt out always asking everyone, how are you doing? And then they're being like, I'm fine. I'm like, but really, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And then you have to, I feel like that's like that secondary trauma that you like feel of having to take on other people's emotions sometimes. And so it is really hard to ask people to be like, listen non-judgmentally and be empathetic, because that leads to so much burnout of your own time that you eventually feel like, well, someone else can just ask them and someone else can be that person to do that.
Can we in this room, with your help, share with some of the telltale signs of someone that wants to commit suicide? Because there are many signs that people are not even aware of because they don't know. But if we know in this room, think of maybe we can impact a lot of people by hearing what they say. And like say they're getting their room together and tidying all of their things and paying all their bills and making sure everything's fine when they leave. That's what I'm saying.
So I'm pulling it up because I want to make sure I know every single one of them. So this is the one that comes out of QPR and out of our Hope Squad Hope approach. We use Is Path Warm. It's the mnemonic device that helps you remember. Is path warm. The I standing for ideation. So someone's saying that they're considering, like, for a lot of younger people, a lot of them will use expressions like going to sleep and never waking up, right? Older adults, young adults, and like beyond 25 are likely to more say something like,
off themselves.
Yeah, off themselves, making some other comments. So that's the I. S is substance use, right? So I'm the Youth Cannabis and Commercial Tobacco Prevention Program Coordinator at the ESD. So my biggest concern is when I talk to youth who are dealing with mental health challenges, are they using marijuana or nicotine? Both are really, nicotine's highly addictive, right? And we also know, though cannabis isn't technically addictive, we do know that there are youth, right, who experience addiction to cannabis, to marijuana, and we call that, cannabis use disorder. So youth who, or just people in general who are using substances more often. If you have a friend who maybe only has a drink every once in a while when you go out to a bar and is suddenly drinking a few more drinks than usual and drinking more often, like that's a really big sign, right? Humans, we use substances as a way of coping. They help us numb feelings. They make us feel lighter or better, right? So substance use. So the IS is ideation, substance use. And then path is purposelessness. So someone's saying like, I just don't feel like I have anything going for me. Like, it doesn't matter. Feeling that like dispirited, like kind of like, I don't feel like I have a purpose in life. I don't really feel like I have a reason to live. I don't really feel like my career is going anywhere. I don't really, that kind of thing. And then A is anxiety. So someone who's experiencing anxiety more. Anxiety is part of our life, right? We all experience stress and anxiety, but someone who's experiencing heightened levels to the point where it impairs functioning. So when I think about, we like to think in mental health, we call it DIF, duration, impact, and function, duration, impact, and frequency. So if someone is experiencing anxiety, right, it's normal to experience anxiety, especially when I think of youth, it's like, oh, I have a test next week, I'm feeling anxious about it, right? Or graduation's coming up, I'm feeling anxious. But if they're experiencing anxiety for a long period of time, it's impacting their ability to function, to go to work, to experience social situations, right? And is it happening more frequently? Like, is it in cycles, right? So when you're talking about that depression cycle, it's normal for us as humans to feel depression, to feel depressed, but is it impacting our ability? So like for an adult that you may be seeing, like was your coworker, was it impacting their ability to like come to work? Were they missing work more often? So that's anxiety. Trapped, someone who feels trapped and has feeling like they have a hard time seeing kind of the end of the tunnel, right? So saying things like, when you say something like, well, tomorrow will be different, right? Or like, what can I help you to make tomorrow better? They're just like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And then hopelessness. So experiencing this feeling of like, a little different than purposelessness. So not saying like I don't have a reason to live, but a feeling of like, it doesn't even matter that, like I don't feel like anything's gonna get better, that, things aren't going the way I want them to, and there's nothing I can do to fix it. And then warm, so withdrawal, so someone who's withdrawing in isolation, right? So someone who maybe is normally a really social person, is suddenly doesn't want to respond to your texts anymore or doesn't engage with you anymore. Anger is the A, so someone who's feeling angry, increased anger. And I think that thinking about it, it's normal to feel anger, but more like on the rage kind of end of anger, of feeling like Explosive, yeah, because that then leads into the R, which is recklessness. So for youth, the way that we see that is like, you came in wearing your helmet. Like recklessness is like for youth is like, when your mom used to say like, if they jump off the cliff, are you gonna jump off with them? Like it's the saying of, yeah, I'm gonna definitely jump off the cliff with them, of just feeling this invincibility of like, I'm being loose with my life right now. Like I know I need to wear a helmet, but I also just feel like I don't care if I die, so I'm just gonna wing it kind of thing. And then the M being mood changes. So that one's kind of hard because when I think of teens are moody as heck. Like one minute they're like, oh, sunshine and rainbows, and the next minute they're like, I'm so angry at the world. But I think this one maybe is a little easier for us to recognize in adults. So I'm a generally like, maybe you can tell, a generally like happy, like like loud, passionate person. And so there was a period of time in the last year where I experienced a depressive episode and I took some time off of work. But at the time, my boss is the one who suggested I do it because I was clearly at a mood change. I wasn't coming in with the same like zest that I normally came in with. And she was like, something is going on. Like, you are irritable and you're not coming in with the same kind of like sunshine that you usually do. And you know, that was like my cry for help, was that mood change. So I think that one's a volatile type of sign. But you have to think too that if you just see one of these signs, that doesn't necessarily mean someone's experiencing a mental health challenge or is experiencing this feeling of wanting to end their life. We have to think of them in multiple contexts too, and to think about the person that that you're seeing, right? And so, like, I'll be vulnerable and say, like, if someone noticed that I was was feeling suicidal, they might notice maybe some substance use, probably. I don't usually drink very often, but in times of like depressive episodes, I might drink a little bit more. Mood changes. I would also probably withdraw a lot. I like to be alone when I don't feel like myself. I also think purposelessness, hopelessness, and anxiety. So if you saw all of those things together for myself, that would probably be a sign to say, hey, how are you actually doing? Let's talk about it, because I'm noticing all of these things. It's also okay to tell someone that you noticed something about them. That's one of the best things that we teach youth as Hope Squad members to kind of lead up to is, hey, I've been noticing, that you're not as happy to be at track practice like you usually are. Like, you're usually excited to be here. Like, is something going on? And, as an opportunity to kind of get people to open up. And I think, there's nothing wrong with saying you've made an observation, because it doesn't make it about you. It doesn't make it about saying I feel like you've been doing this. It can just be simply as I've noticed that you haven't been coming to work on time. Is something going on? Right? Just like, that's a simple opening. And then it's up to that person to be vulnerable and share with you.
I was just going to ask, is there education like this on social media? If that's where the kids are at, they're spending their time on social media, I'm curious.
See, and this brings me up to the algorithm thing, because unless we're there's some super awesome programs, like campaigns that come out of Department of Health, Washington State Healthcare Authority. We have the 988, which is our suicide crisis line, we have a bunch of different ways for youth to engage online with those resources, but an algorithm sometimes gets in the way of that, because if they're not engaging with some of those things, then those things aren't showing up. So when you were saying, you looked up your name in 3rd grade and it was like Jeffrey Dahmer, and now as an adult, your algorithm knows you. Unless youth are engaging in that content, I feel like not all of them are receiving the right kind of support.
Like a hope spot. And the reason I asked this is because when my kids were toddlers, and I think when you have babies, there's a lot out there about depression. What's it called? Postpartum depression.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, yeah. But it's like this extreme of you're having thoughts of killing yourself, but there's a whole nother level of past depression that's not trying to hurt your baby, right? And that was me. It was in a different way. And so I had a gift box company, a self-care gift box company for moms. What was interesting is I would go to networking events and people would keep posting what you're posting. They didn't engage, they didn't like it, they didn't comment, they didn't buy, they weren't a customer, but they went, everything you're saying, I am connecting with, right? And so I'm just curious from a teen's perspective, if they're on there and they're seeing other people saying, hey, I experienced this, or I experienced this, and there's a vulnerability to that, right?
Yeah.
And this was in 2017, and that was kind of at the height, just as I started doing it and I started opening up, other people started opening up. And then it became much more, I know Drew Barrymore and they started talking about it more and opening up. And so I'm just curious, how do we take that same thing and apply it to teenagers and help them see like this is normal.
Yeah.
Like we're all, you know, a lot of different people are experiencing this, and this is how you do it, but in a way that's engaging. I think about like Washington Department of Health. I'm probably like, bored.
I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah. No, I think
So,
you're
yeah,
right. Yeah.
So I have a question. So, I mean, you've talked about how, I mean, community is really important, and you're going into the schools and you're training, you know, a group of the Hope Squad kids and the staff and all. But are you also doing some type of activities that are promoting community
Yes.
among all this?
Yeah, so our Hope Squad students do a monthly mental health activity at their school every month, and we're really pushing them now to start and try to do more community involved things. So like, for example, I'll give a plug to our Prevent Suicide Spokane Coalition. They're going to hold a Hope Walk in the fall, in October, and all our Hope Squad kiddos are required to attend that Hope Walk this year, and their job is going to be to really promote that in their communities. We also are really trying to work on how do we get parents more involved. Students do have to have parent permission to participate in Hope Squad, so parents go through a short orientation, but after that, then it's just, if something comes up, a student will talk with their parents at home. But how do we push parents to become more involved? So we've been talking about like voluntary opportunities for them to come into schools and do that. We're going to hold a Hope Squad retreat at the end of September at the Shriners Event Center. This will be our 3rd year, and it is taking a different turn than it has in the past, and we're inviting community members to come be a part of that. We're trying to invite we're going to have resource tables, and the goal here is for students to have the resource tables. Like, I feel like when you go to a vendor fair or whatever, there's all these tables and all these things that you can participate in, but we're being really selective because we want them to have an opportunity for our students to get involved. So like PSSC will be there with their Hope Walk, so helping youth understand like what are some things I can do to prepare myself to participate in Hope Walk. Does that mean I can put up a yard sign in my yard that says, hey, I'm a Hope Squad student, so I'm participating in Hope Walk or something? But I think you're asking the big questions of how do we really encourage youth to take to the place where they're connecting with youth. Mm-hmm. And you're right, the Washington Department of Health has great stuff, but I too gloss over it, and I like, that's some of this, you know, regional health district, great, you know, information, right? But how do we really reach youth? And I think that has me just ask the question is, how do we get youth to this table or to a table and ask them, how do you reach each other? Because I'm not a 14-year-old on Instagram you know, I don't even know if they use Instagram. I mean, I love Facebook, but you know, like they're on TikTok and Snapchat
like
and stuff. YouTube and TikTok. So like, how do we get them to be the leads in this? And that's really where Hope Squad comes in too, is that we want youth to lead this movement, because I think that's really where we get the most out of it. As adults, I think our job then is to just give them the resources that they need, whether it's like, I need an adult to schedule this for me. I need you to write a check, right? That kind of stuff.
So I was in a group yesterday, and we had a guest speaker who was a social media expert, and her talk was on how to go viral.
Yeah.
And the takeaway that I heard from that is literally flood the zone. That you know, I think, and I know I make this mistake. I get so caught up on, I'm going to post once.
Yeah.
And I want to know who does it reach. And what she does is she, you know, first she teaches the good things, like you have to be authentic. You just, it's not marketing, it's being yourself online. But then she's very intentional about saying when she posts, it's on 8 platforms and it's 10 times a day, and you know, it's just flood the zone, because the algorithm is going to do what the algorithm does. But the more there's content out there to share, the more it will, you know, put it in front of people based on your connection to them.
I think that's the wrong approach, and that's why you're having 0 results. I do marketing, I do sales, I do all that, and I like to engage. Your problem is you're trying to get kids to go to something that says URL or government or whatever it is. Use the algorithm against them. Use Google AdWords of different things and post it to connect to where you are. rather than just saying, okay, I'm a kid that wants to commit suicide. Kids aren't going to look up that stuff.
No.
And for some reason we have that. The other part I would say is, instead of posting something like, we're doing a walk, which is great, it's to boast money and to help doing what you're doing. But I think what you're saying is, what is something that kids can engage in and be a part of, rather than doing a walk that most kids aren't going to be a part of. And then most of it, the ones who are, is just going to be, family and friends throwing money at it. They really need to be engaged and have concerts and do things that are fairs and different things that are part of it, right? Is that kind of what you were?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more just like, just, I don't even know. And I guess I haven't really looked into it, so I don't know, but I just know that like me sharing my story affected other people, whether I knew it or not, right?
Yeah.
And so how can we get
More to share their
used
story.
or funny, right? Like my kids on YouTube, what are the entertaining stupid things? Like my son posted a video of him skateboarding through it got 100,000 views.
That's awesome.
Like, how can you take that
how do
video
you take
and
that?
add information about mental health on it? Things that kids are going to be engaged in because they're going to see it because their eyes go to movement or whatever it is, but it's got education in it, right? So that was kind of what I was thinking of.
No, thank you for that. And again, I think this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Kirsten, for coming. And just keep sharing, keep any ideas out there to help reach each other. And I think we all have a tendency to say, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. Let's be a little bit more honest. And
before we go, I do want to make sure we make a shout out. We're at Action Business Furniture Friday afternoons, and we appreciate them making this space available, this table, for us to speak at. And we invite you to come join us every Friday or any Friday that you're available.
Just like my young nephew said to me, he said to me the sweetest thing. He said, Uncle Mike, I subscribe to your YouTube channel to help you try to get the YouTube Play Button Award. And that's what we need you guys to do. We need you all to subscribe, because subscribing really helps us get this message out. So be sure to check out our guests. All of her links in the video description below. Be sure to like this video. Remember to comment any questions you have in the comments below. Sharing is caring, and we will see you next week. Bye!